Okay, hopefully this works. So, here today to talk about some Asian dinosaur movies. If you've been to my panels before, you know that I tend to have a lot of content because I always start off thinking, oh, I'll have 5 to 10 movies to think about, and then 70 movies later, I'm like, oh no, what have I done? So, we're gonna start off talking about Japanese movies because I think that's what would be of most interest to the people here. But if we have extra time at the end, we can get more into the Korean and Chinese-made things. So, for the sake of this panel, because I know somebody's going to come up and correct us, we're going to use a very loose definition of dinosaurs, and we're going to say real extinct Mesozoic animals, because I'm sure somebody will come up and be like, but you know, plesiosaurs aren't actually dinosaurs, and I'd just be like, well, you know, close enough for our purposes. But we're not going to talk about mammoths, we're not going to talk about alligator movies, we're not going to talk about dragons. So I'm sure somebody is going to also be like, well, this is a kaiju convention, or can you really call a dinosaur a kaiju? And to that I point to this scene in the 1993 movie Rex, A Dinosaur Story, where the paleontologist is like, no, it's not a monster, it's a dinosaur, and his mom is like, they're the same thing. So I'll decide with his mom for the sake of our discussion here today. So obviously, I think all of us are fans of the Godzilla franchise, and there have been a whole lot of examples of dinosaurs as characters and setting in the Godzilla movies. I think we're all pretty familiar with these, so I don't think we need to necessarily go into them. But there have been other interesting overlaps. One of my favorite pieces of art is this from a booklet from 1994 that shows an illustration of what some of the Godzilla characters would be like if they were depicted as more scientifically accurate dinosaurs as understood at the time. And then Godzilla and dinosaurs have crossed over in many other forms of media. You got a book that was a children's guide to dinosaurs hosted by Godzilla, for an example. And Godzilla Karta cards, which had Godzilla and dinosaurs together in the same card set. It was this kind of a big merchandise push for a while. And then you also find all sorts of other things in American media, especially. The Hanna-Barbera cartoon has a dinosaur episode. The Trendmasters figures had Godzilla and dinosaur characters packaged together. Marvel and Dark Horse both had dinosaur issues. Godzilla crossed over with the Devil Dinosaur. This was actually the first time that Devil Dinosaur from the Marvel Comics crossed over into the main Marvel Comics universe. And the Dark Horse comic was actually a concept from Bob Eggleton, and then very shortly thereafter, a very similar concept was used in the movie Mothra 3 about King Ghidorah killing dinosaurs in the past, and Mothra having to time travel to stop him. So the first dinosaur movies that played in Japan were, you know, kind of the first dinosaur movies in the whole world. They were The Lost World and King Kong, and both of those came to Japan pre-war, and because of the war, they were banned for a long period of time. But after they were unbanned, they started playing in theaters again, and before even that, you started to get these manga adaptations from Osamu Tezuka, the god of comics in Japan. He did these adaptations of The Lost World and of King Kong. And these are popular, so you start to see dinosaurs popping up in a lot of children's magazines. This was the main form of media after the war. One of the most famous examples of that is Shoji Yamakawa's books of the Kenya Boy series, the Shonen Kenya. This is set in Kenya around the time of the war, and it's about a little boy who's separated from his father and living in the jungle, much like Tarzan. But because this was kind of a very adventurous thing, the jungles of Kenya are full of giant frogs and lizard people and Nazis and dinosaurs. So this was a very popular series, and there was actually a movie adaptation from Daiei in 1954, so the same year that the original Godzilla came out, that has, the boy's companion giant snake in it. I really want to see this movie, but it's never been released in full on home video, unfortunately. But how this ties into the whole Godzilla franchise is that Yamakawa, the guy that made Kenya Boy, had a student, Wasuke Abe, who designed Godzilla. From there, Kenya Boy continued to exist in Japanese pop culture. It got a TV series in 1961, and this had some more crossovers. There was some dinosaurs that showed up in that, along with the giant snake and other kind of strange things that you would run into in this fantasy version of Africa. This was lost for a long period of time. If you've read my book, you see where I talk about how it's lost. It's now no longer lost because it was found in 2017. So fortunately, it has been recovered. This was a big hit in Japan, and it inspired a number of imitators. One of the examples that's very prominent is Cave Boy Ryu, which was a Shotaro Ishinomori comic and got an anime adaptation, again about this kind of feral child who has adventures battling a number of dinosaurs. And then more directly, there was also the Monster Prince TV series, which Fuminori Ohashi, the same person that had worked on the modeling for the monsters in Kenya Boy, did the monsters in Monster Prince. And this is about a kid and his pet Nessie, and they battle all sorts of dinosaur creatures. Fun fact, actually, the manga adaptations for both of those titles were done by the same guy, Shuta Ishikawa. So for Ultraman fans out there, I'm sure everybody knows there are a number of dinosaur characters that pop up in Ultraman. Here are just a handful of classic examples. A few of my favorites, just because they are so weird. You've got the Dinosauroids in Ultraman Tiga that are like hyper evolved until they have basically human forms. You have a Skeldon in the Ultraman, who's just literally a skeleton going on a rampage. One of my other favorites, just because most kaiju in Ultraman have names. Not this guy, not Kyoryu Sensha, because Kyoryu Sensha literally means dinosaur tank. It's right that's on the label. Ultraman Media starts off with a monster that's a long-necked guy there, called Dinosaur. He doesn't look like a dinosaur, but that's what his name is. And Zeton, the monster that kills Ultraman in the last episode of the original series, is... Yeah, spoilers for a show from 1966. His title is a space dinosaur. That's what they say. He's a space dinosaur. I don't see the resemblance, but stuff is different in space. So Tsuburaya did a lot more dinosaur stuff than that. In the 70s, after the Ultraman series had kind of run its course, they started experimenting with other forms of media. And one of the things that they were doing was some mixed animation. And this guy, Minoru Kujirai, started doing all of these ambitious shorts that were combining different forms of animation. So you would have, stop motion with cell animation on top of it that looked like anime. Anime was getting very popular at the time. So one of the stop motion things that he worked on that was really cool is called the Time Tunnel, where it's basically some people going and being assaulted by stop motion dinosaurs. It's a lot like Land of the Lost, which was very kind of taken off in the US at the same time. But this was enough of a successful pitch that they got around to making actually 3 dinosaur shows in the 1970s, and it's called the Dinosaur Trilogy, and each one is done a little bit differently than the others. So the first is Born Free, which is about kind of a team that goes and captures dinosaurs for rescue missions. And that's done with stop motion and animation for the dinosaurs, and the humans are all done in anime style. Turns out stop motion is really, really difficult to do on a TV timeline. So for their next show, Eisenborg, which is sort of a superhero type of deal, like Ultraman, you have the anime people are on top of traditional tokusatsu dinosaur effects. This is we'll get into a little bit more of that in a bit. And then the last show in the trilogy is Koseidon, where it doesn't have the anime component anymore. It's just the live action and the dinosaur effects. So it feels like it's slowly evolving to become more like Ultraman as the time goes by. So Eisenborg is an interesting one. It was done as a compilation movie called Attack of the Super Monsters in the US, which has become a bit of a notorious thing among anime fandom, and it actually has a Riff Tracks edition, so you can watch it that way. But that's only the first 4 episodes. You don't get to the actual superhero stuff in that. But it's a very popular series in Saudi Arabia, to the point where they actually very recently commissioned new footage for a special Return of Eisenborg movie to be made just for the Arabian market. More recently, Matt Frank and Hiroshi Kanetani, who were both at the convention this year, teamed up for a comic book series where Matt Frank is drawing the human people in one style, and Hiroshi is drawing the kaiju and heroes in a different style, just to imitate that combination of live action and anime footage that you get in the original show. And then the kind of dinosaur character that's front and center there might look familiar to you. He's the leader of the bad dinosaurs in the show, but that's actually a bit of a recycled costume, because it's also in the Last Dinosaur, which is a Tsuburaya Rankin-Bass co-production from the 70s. It went straight to TV in the US, and it played a lot, and it got a theatrical release in Japan. And this is about an expedition to the South Pole, where there's a secret little patch of territory where there's still dinosaurs, and this big game hunter, played by Richard Boone, goes in and decides that he's gonna go because that's the last place on Earth that he can still be his macho self and kill animals. So it's actually a delightful movie. It's got a great theme song. If nothing else, watch that theme song. It's available on DVD right now in the US. I'm hoping for a Blu-ray release at some point, but would recommend checking it out, because it's just a great little Lost World romp. So Rankin-Bass is an interesting one because they're well known in the US, but a lot of their stuff was, well, most of their stuff, frankly, was actually done in Japan, including all of their animation work. So over the decades, you see different examples of projects done by Rankin-Bass that were actually animated in Japan, and people aren't aware of that. But here are a few examples with dinosaurs. The King Kong show. This was actually the first commission of the material to be made in Japan by a US company. Willie McBean and his Magic Machine, which was a stop motion thing. A lot of people know Rankin-Bass for their stop motion Christmas specials, but this was not a Christmas special. And then also Thundercats briefly had an episode with dinosaurs, which I thought was a fun little piece of trivia. In the 1970s, there was this big boom in paranormal popularity, and you could see it everywhere, from Echo Echo Azarak to The Exorcist. All of these paranormal things were becoming very fashionable to talk about in the media. And one of those things was the Loch Ness Monster. So in Japan, there's kind of a famous creature that showed up in Lake Kushiro, called a Kusi. It's kind of a play on Nessie, which gets name dropped in the unmade Godzilla movie, Godzilla, God's Angry Messenger. There's also the creature that was probably a shark that was captured by a Japanese fishing trawler, the Zuiyu Maru, and that got called New Nessie, also in the media a whole lot. You can see the actual corpse there, but that gets referenced in Godzilla vs. King Ghidorah. And then lastly, in Lake Akita, there was a creature that was called Issei that was getting sighted all the time. So there's all of these lake monster sightings in Japan all of a sudden. Lake Ikeda is also the place where Mothra comes out in GMK. So that's definitely like a deliberate callback of like this creature rising out of the lake was meant to evoke that. So you can see a lot of Nessie-related stuff in Japanese pop culture in the 1970s. Toho was going to make a movie called Nessie that we did a whole panel about that unmade movie at the last G-Fest, so you can go check that one out if you're more curious about that. In the unmade movie A Space Godzilla from Nobuhiko Obayashi, when Godzilla's corpse washes up on the shore, people think that it might be the Loch Ness Monster at first. And then Terror of Mechagodzilla, featuring Tomoko Ai, our guest this year. A lot of people are confused by this whole plot line of like, well, why are people so wondering about, Dr. Mifune saying, oh, he found this lost dinosaur living in the ocean. Well, that's because there was this whole pop cultural zeitgeist at the time that was obsessed with aquatic dinosaurs that could be lost. That doesn't translate so well today, and a lot of people miss that subtext in the movie. So this all culminates in the 1977 Toei picture, The Legend of Dinosaurs and Monster Birds, which, again, some people will be keen to point out that there's no actual dinosaurs in this movie. It's a plesiosaur and a pterosaur, but they're fighting each other. It's very much a Jaws knockoff, but the idea is that all of these tourists go to this lake in the wilderness and get picked off by these giant creatures that then have a kind of goofy battle with each other at the end, all things to be honest. But it's a very fun movie. It's got an amazing soundtrack. Would recommend Legend of Dinosaurs and Monster Birds. I'll probably get hate for that, but I love it. It's got kind of a long lifetime after its initial release. It had a manga adaptation. It got released on VHS in the US initially with this great VHS box cover where it says, just for kids, and it has this dinosaur mauling somebody in a very bloody, violent way. It's like, oh yes, lots of children, I understand, have been traumatized by this tape over the years. What? Yes, also possible. This one is also featured on Mystery Science Theater, so I think people might be familiar with it from that. And then I gotta point out the opening sequence in this movie, which has to do with somebody going through Aokigahara, the forest by Mount Fuji, and falling into this ice cave where there's an egg that hatches and releases this ancient creature, is very similar to the sequence with Yukijiro Hotaru's character in GMK. Also with a suicidal guy wandering into an ice cave in the forest and awakening Ghidorah. Further on in the 70s, we got the animated feature Age of the Great Dinosaurs. This was part of Shotaro Ishinomori's Fantasy World June series, but it was done as a TV film. It's actually the first anime broadcast in stereo. That's unfortunate because if you find the English dub, it's in not very good audio quality. It's very hard to hear what the characters are saying nowadays, but there is an English dub of this out there. So this is basically a story about several children being abducted by aliens and thrown back through the course of time to see the full existence of humankind so that they can learn that life is precious and that we shouldn't pollute the environment or else we'll wind up like the dinosaurs. I don't know if that's an effective lesson for the aliens to be doing, 3 children at a time, but it works out for the sake of the movie. What's kind of fun about this movie is, as some people have pointed out, there are some similarities between this and the Land Before Time, the 80s American film. Particularly the design of the Tyrannosaur that menaces the children. It looks very similar to the Sharptooth. And they have this sidekick, baby dinosaur, for most of the film. It sounds like they're saying babyfoot, but they might be saying baby puss. Like I said, the dub is really, really, really hard to hear. But again, it's funny that, the main dinosaur in The Land Before Time also has that, diminutive name behind him. So we mentioned Kenya Boy before, and we mentioned Nobuhiko Obayashi. We have to bring up the 1984 Kenya Boy movie, because this movie is insane. It's pretty much an adaptation of the original short story series, but because this is the same director that did House and Space Godzilla and a lot of other very avant-garde, bizarre movies, this is the only animated movie that he's ever made. You get very surreal sequences where characters will just, switch race for no reason, just because it's funny, or they will turn inside out, or they'll colors will invert, people will be pixelated. It's trippy. There's no better word for it. But it has perhaps the greatest unironic climax, in which the main characters are abducted by Nazis. The Nazis set off a nuke. The nuke opens a rift in space-time in which dinosaurs come out. The dinosaurs then battle a giant snake that is friends with the main characters, and that's the happy ending. I really hope that somebody distributes this movie in the West at some point, because it is a wild ride, even if it is objectively perhaps not what you would call good. There's a short movie from the 80s called The Forest of Heresy. This was just kind of a little romp with characters, human characters with weapons, going through this forest that's full of dinosaurs and confronting them. I just love it because it's this practical effects film that is very under the radar. It's been released on DVD in Japan on a collection with some other short films, but I figured obscurities like that would be things that the G-Fest audience could appreciate. One of the biggest dinosaur films that doesn't really get talked about very much because it's animated and part of this other big franchise is the first Doraemon feature. Doraemon is a huge franchise in Japan. It's about this robot cat from the future that befriends a boy, and they go on all these bizarre adventures together. And it has had this ongoing series of movies, dozens of them, along with television shows and manga that's been going since the 50s. But the first movie adaptation is about the main character befriending a little plesiosaur and raising it, and then they go to dinosaur times together to return it to be with its friends. And this has been quite a groundbreaking hit, well-remembered film, to the point where it's gotten both sequels and remakes specifically to the Nobita's Dinosaur section of it, including a 2006 remake. Notably for us, this movie, when it debuted in Japan, it was on a double bill with a reissue of Mothra vs. Godzilla, and some Japanese fans have speculated, because it's well publicized, that Steven Spielberg went to go see the movie in the theaters, and then he made E.T., which is a movie about a boy befriending a strange creature, then having to return it to be with his family, that he might have taken some inspiration from the two. So that was my clever segue, because Steven Spielberg also made a movie called Jurassic Park. Jurassic Park was a big hit everywhere in the world, as well as Japan. So it had a lot of media tie-ins, including a manga by Kazumi Sakamoto. I really would like to see this manga get translated, but I'm sure it is a nightmare in terms of licensing for something this old and also with this many companies involved. But it really captures a lot of the key moments that you would see when you went to see the movie in the theaters. And then there was some other stuff that was made in Japan just as exclusives to the Jurassic Park series, including a Doraemon crossover at Universal Studios, and some rides, some theme park attractions, and a video game. But a rising tide raises all ships, and thus, when Jurassic Park came out, everybody wanted to make a dinosaur movie. So you got all of these movies that came out kind of trying to cash in on the success of Jurassic Park with dinosaurs. The 90s was a great time for dinosaurs. I don't know how to explain this to people who weren't there at the time, but you just go to the VHS store and anything that you want is got dinosaurs in it. And of course, a lot of these were also released in Japan. Japan didn't stop there though, because they made a lot of their own stuff to cash in on Jurassic Park as well. One of the most overt ones is this thing called Powerful Jurassic World. This was made by Tsuburaya Entertainment, which would not be confused with Tsuburaya Productions. It's the company that the son of Eiji Tsuburaya had spun off. And it's basically this hour-long documentary with stop-motion dinosaur footage, and it's actually pretty entertaining. It's very difficult to track down in its original form. I suspect that maybe there was some, concern over copyright violation, because after a year, they reissued Powerful Jurassic World under a different title. They called it just Dinosaur World on 2 different VHS tapes. They split it into a Cretaceous section and a Jurassic section. Again, these tapes are very difficult to track down, but there are some clips floating around on the internet, and it looks delightful. This wasn't the only dinosaur documentary, because the NHK, which is the big public television channel in Japan, also got in on the action, and they made a whole Book of Life series, including a whole feature on dinosaurs. And this is available on DVD as part of a box set for Book of Life stuff, but it's basically what you would expect from like a history or a Discovery Channel type of documentary. At the time, it was a big deal because it had a lot of CGI. CGI dinosaurs were not common in 1994, so it was kind of groundbreaking and seen as a landmark from that perspective. One of my favorite things that was cashing in on Jurassic Park is the Kadokawa film Rex, A Dinosaur Story. This is about a little girl who finds a baby dinosaur and basically raises it and has to take it to be released at the end of the movie back into the wilderness. They have a lot of zany adventures together. It's a delightful children's film. It looks like it was intended to be something for an international release. The credits are all in English. It seems like it was just primed for a dub. It was a huge, huge hit when it played in theaters in Japan. It was Kadokawa's biggest selling movie until Lord of the Rings came out. And it kind of wound up getting buried a little bit because the director got caught with cocaine and they pulled it out of theaters. So it's a shame because it's a really fun, just delightful little movie. It's very cute. You have the girl teaching her dinosaur, training it like a pet. And then they go on very E.T.-like antics as the bad guys are chasing them down to try to keep her from releasing it into the wild. It got a whole lot of media tie-ins. It had a picture book. It had 2 different manga adaptations, including one by Clamp, who were not the huge mega hits that they became later in the 90s. These are the people that did Chobits and Tokyo Babylon and Holic and Magic Knight Ray Earth. Many hit titles from the 1990s were this group of 4 women. And because of that, for a long time, it was actually easier to find fan translations of the manga adaptation than of the movie itself. Both of them are now available through fan translations, thankfully. Now, like I said, Rex was a big hit. I think that maybe Toho was taking notes. Because a few months later, they came out with a movie where a baby dinosaur is hatched, befriends a woman, gets studied in a scientific reserve, eats plants, has a kind of psychic connection. There's a whole lot of connections between Godzilla vs. Mechagodzilla 2 and Rex, A Dinosaur Story. One of my favorite particular connections is actually the whole combination. There's a whole storyline in Rex where people start trying to exploit the dinosaur and make him appear in television commercials. Toho just went all out and put baby Godzilla in actual commercials. So you would think, okay, so 1993 had a cool movie about a child with a pet dinosaur that has to be released, and they have a kind of special bond, a psychic connection. How often can that happen? And the answer is, well, apparently more than once, because there's also the animated film Coup of the Far Seas. This is actually a beautiful film, another one that I would love to see get a US release. The animation is fantastic, and it's basically about a boy who lives on his own with his dad, who's a scientist, and they are in a tropical island, and he finds this strange animal, and he brings it to his dad, and it's like, hey, what's this? And his dad says, it's probably a seal. And then he brings it to the chief of the natives there, and the chief is like, that looks like it might be a turtle, but it doesn't have a shell. That's kind of weird. But yeah, sure enough, it turns out that this creature, Ku, keeps growing larger and larger, and it is in fact a plesiosaur. And of course, eventually, a group of dastardly people come to the island with weapons to try to take Ku away, and they have a big conflict and a big fight with very Home Alone style props. It's really a fun movie. Also, I should note, Coup of the Far Seas is not the same thing as Summer Days with Ku, which is a movie about a kappa, which is like a little turtle imp creature. That one is available in the US. So if you go looking for the movie called Ku with the boy and the sea creature, you might be confused. Now, this was not the first attempt to adapt this story. Actually, when it was first attempted, it was in the 80s and by Toho. And Koichi Kawakita, the guy that did special effects for the 90s Godzilla movies, was on board to make this movie. And doing some of the design work was Shinji Nishikawa. This is actually how he got hired at Toho, was for a Ku movie. And it's funny because, again, Shinji Nishikawa goes on to design Baby Godzilla. So again, I'd mentioned Nobita's Dinosaur and Jurassic Park exploitation, so it's a great synergy that both of them come together in 1994 when you get a stage show version of Nobita's Dinosaur. So just retelling that story again for the live action scene. There's also a lot of dinosaurs on television in Japan in the 1990s because, again, dinosaurs are everywhere in the 1990s. The most well-known example is going to be Kyoryu Sentai Zyuranger, which is the 16th entry in the long-running Super Sentai franchise. And the idea behind this one is that it's dinosaur-themed. Some people in the US were watching, and they said, hey, dinosaurs plus superheroes, we should do that. So they licensed the show, replaced all of the Japanese footage with American actors, and re-released it as Mighty Morphin Power Rangers, and it became a huge, huge hit all around the world. A few of the other series that came out were all animated, and I hope to see some of these get licensed at some point in the near future. Juro Tripper is one that's a lot of fun, as well as a Muka Muka Paradise, which is kind of about a whole village that lives in tandem with dinosaurs. And yeah, unfortunately, those other programs have not gotten any sort of English language release so far. Some things that have actually gotten English language release, Dinosaurs from the 2000s is kind of a Transformers knockoff with dinosaurs in it. Dinosaur King, which is part of the whole exploitation movement where they were trying to cash in on the success of Yu-Gi-Oh, where kids use dinosaurs to battle each other. and Aba Ranger, which is another Sentai series that's focused around dinosaurs. So we're in the 2000s now, and that's a good point to talk about Tatsuya Miyanishi's Tyrannosaurus series. This is a bunch of children's books that is written about a T-Rex named Heart that goes on these kind of heartwarming adventures, and you get to, over the course of the books, see more of his family and learn, the first is really about him encountering a baby Ankylosaurus and deciding like, oh, I'm not actually going to eat this Ankylosaur because it thinks that I'm its mother and that would be too mean, and then they have very a heartwarming kind of relationship as the T-Rex is protecting this other baby dinosaur against other dinosaurs that want to eat it. It's very cute. Would recommend reading it to your children. And it's a big hit in Japan, so you've got all sorts of adaptations over the years, from stage shows to puppet shows. There's even a crossover with Ultraman. Yo.
Are you saying it's not like the original Mandalorian?
I would say the original Mandalorian is Lone Wolf and Cub, so, but it's a similar kind of deal with somebody who's adopted a baby and is kind of taking care of it. And gets softer over time because he has to take care of the baby, but is still a hard guy when it comes to fighting the others. So this, of course, has had a movie adaptation. It's had multiple movie adaptations. The 2010 movie, which is the first in the series, is fantastic. It finally has a US release through Discotek. It was just released a couple of months ago. And I would say check that out. It's great if you ever want to see a T-Rex doing lots of kicks and beating the tar out of other monsters. Unfortunately, the sequels, not so good. My Tyranno I haven't actually seen. That's the third one, which was a Korean co-production. It was actually directed by Kobun Shizuno, who you would know from the Polygon Godzilla animated trilogy. So it's more CGI as it goes on, but that first movie is solid, legit. Would recommend you check that one out. So some people will know that the Godzilla was inspired by The Beast from 20,000 Fathoms, which was an adaptation of a Ray Bradbury story called The Foghorn. The Foghorn actually got its own adaptation made in Japan in 2007. By a filmmaker named Daisuke Sato, and it was a cool little black and white feature with a dinosaur that's attracted by the sound of a lighthouse's foghorn and kind of comes up and crashes into it. This is not available. It's apparently lost. It was apparently on a hard drive that failed, and he doesn't have backups for it, which is a real shame. But the silver lining of this story is that Sato went on to kind of tweak this concept for a movie called Howl from Beyond the Fog, which is a beautiful, beautiful movie with a sort of dinosaur-like creature that lives in a lake and is brought out by some of the sounds there. It's all done with puppet effects, so it's really cool to see. It's available from SRS, so if you're going to buy something from SRS, this is one of the things that should be at the top of the list. Another plesiosaur-related movie is Real from Kiyoshi Kurosawa. The plesiosaur in this movie is, spoiler, is not real. The whole idea with this movie is that it's about a guy whose wife is in a coma, and he kind of hooks up to her mind to go into her dream space, and she has a trauma in her backstory that manifests as a plesiosaur for some reason. It's a mystery that you find out as you watch the film. But there's a lot of fun sequences of them battling this plesiosaur, which is really a metaphor for something that she doesn't want to deal with. So it's a neat movie, but again, not exactly technically a dinosaur film. There's an episode of the Next Generation Patlabor called Crocodile Dungeon. I believe this is one of the ones that Kiyotaka Taguchi worked on. In the original Pat Labor animated series, there's an episode where they go into the sewers and they find some giant crocodiles. And when they made an animated series, they kind of spoofed on this concept a little bit. They kind of subverted people's expectations because they go into the sewers looking for giant crocodiles, and then instead they find a dinosaur. But it's kind of an anticlimax in a fun way, because while they're running around trying to avoid this dinosaur, when it finally makes it to the surface, Pat Labor is a giant robot series, which is about cops with giant robots that fight bad guys with giant robots. And then the dinosaur gets out into their hangar, and they have a giant robot that completely dwarfs the size of the dinosaur there. Yeah, so again, Pat Labor is fantastic. I keep telling kaiju fans to check it out. They've got some great kaiju spoof episodes. In 2018, there was another NHK documentary series on dinosaurs. It's called A Dinosaur Superworld. People in the paleontology community seem to rant and rave about this show. I haven't watched very much of it myself, but if you are one of those dinosaur people, you should probably put it on your list to check it out. And another movie I haven't had the chance to actually see myself yet is Yamasato no Uda, which is about a village that finds a baby dinosaur and kind of raises it, and it becomes a PR stunt for the people that live there. Haven't found a whole lot outside of a trailer for this film, but it looks neat anyway. There have been a couple of short films that have been in the limelight recently. I changed slides around, so this has Paleonaut listed twice. The animated one isn't Paleonaut, it's called Jurassic. Jurassic is a short film that's just kind of about dinosaurs running amok in a modern day city, and it's very short. You can watch it in just a couple minutes, and it's a delight. Paleonaut is a short film from the director who has a movie coming out very soon called Ike Boys. And the concept there is it's about a guy who's being sent back in time like an astronaut. So it's all kind of him dealing with his emotional state and the preparation of what am I going to do as a settler whose whole thing is to go back in time and explore in ancient times, and I don't know if I'm ever going to be able to come back to the present again. Dinosaur stuff is very minimal in that, but again, it's a cool psychological kind of study. It's a character piece. A couple of things that are fun that you can check out on streaming services. Dino Girl Gauko is on Netflix. That's about a girl who turns into a dinosaur. And Gallon Dino is about a woman who has a dinosaur as a roommate. And it looks really stupid, and it's a lot of fun. Of course, there have been a few lost films over the time. The original Bride of Godzilla from the 50s concept was something where they find a whole cave underground with lots of dinosaurs in it that kind of led to the creation of Rodan later. Godzilla, God's Angry Messenger is a sort of Chariots of the Gods story that never got made from the 80s, where aliens would have picked up Godzilla in ancient times as a dinosaur and mutated him into his current form and then released him. If you ever read that script, it is a head trip. It's wacky. And there was also the American unmade Ultraman movie, Hero from the Stars, which actually is a whole lot like Eisenborg. The whole idea that you have dinosaurs that live under the ground that decide humanity's had its time. I'm going to come up and take over. So it's a similar idea to the anime series Getter Robo also. So, yeah, that's not it. There's all sorts of other dinosaur related content in Japan. I see we got like 5 minutes, so I could keep going with Korea, or we could take questions. What do you guys think? Yo.
I just want to bring this up. I think that is all on HBO Max.
Oh, excellent. Yo.
Regarding this question, do we plan on releasing it on physical media, like DVD or something? Is that available?
I don't know what the release plans are. It might be available in Japan, but NHK is weird. They don't always put things out on home video, even though they really should. Yeah.
Minor correction about Return of Eisenhower.
What?
Minor correction about Return of Eisenhower.
Yes.
It's primarily a documentary, but the last 10 minutes or so are a new episode. Kind of like how they documentary friends and Kazumi.
Yes. Yeah. Exactly. Yeah. And they commissioned Taguchi again to direct the new footage. Yo.
Yeah, like Kamen Rider was mentioned because another one that was a dinosaur series that really got me that at least mentioned is Kamen Rider Revice because of the way they have a T-Rex motif.
Yeah. That one is on right now. So yeah, it was maybe. Sure. Hey. There hasn't, and I think that there should. The only Dinotopia adaptation that I know of is the one, yeah, kind of not so great one. Yep.
Actually, we are going to get a new dinosaur series. Research is going to confirm. Yeah, I think it's funny, the one producers on the big right now.
That is, that's wild.
Yeah, I'm also in a new dinosaur. I'm also in a brand new dinosaur series that we got from one time.
Good to know, thank you. Hey.
Yeah, well, the dinosaur was the 90s. Do you think that's maybe it's good way to take it? That was the last 80s. I think there's a lot of CGI dinosaurs, but even greater ones, like
I'm sorry, I'm having a very hard time hearing you. Yeah. There's a lot of kind of a CG direct-to-video type of stuff that's coming out of China right now. So unfortunately, we're like short on time. Otherwise, I would go through the list of films from China. But that would be the place to kind of look for things along the lines of what you see from like Asylum tier type of stuff with the CGI dinosaurs. Japan hasn't really delved into that very much. Hey.
Are there any surviving copies of Tezuka's adaptations of
The adaptations of what?
the Tezuka manga of Lost World from King Kong?
Yeah, the Lost World is actually available in English. Dark Horse put it out. The King Kong one is much more difficult. You sometimes see them on Mandarake, but they go for big bucks.
King Kong is always
It absolutely is, yeah. Okay, well, I think we're about out of time, but if anybody has questions, feel free to hit me up and I'll hang out for a little bit.